Eamon Gilmore.
Corla, I want to return to the serious state of the economy, and I want to focus in particular on the role of the banks in the economy at the moment. Now, when the Irish economy was booming, the banks were in the driving seat. You could get a loan for anything. They were pushing money at people. But now that the economic circumstances have changed somewhat, the tune of the banks has also changed, and it appears to me that they are now behaving in a way that they may add to our economic difficulties. I'm hearing from businesses, big and small, that when loan review dates come up, the banks are in to reduce the facility, to change the terms, increase interest rates, not waiting for the changes made by the European Central Bank, adding on extra charges, and that businesses who are starting up anew or who are expanding are finding that in effect the banks are now closed to new businesses. In the new economic circumstances that we find ourselves, it appears to me that the banks are now squeezing the life out of many businesses in this country and putting jobs at risk. Now, I don't expect the banks to act in a way that's not commercial or act in a way that isn't responsible to their shareholders. But I do believe that they could apply their credit policies in a more measured and in a more sensitive way in the new circumstances in which we find ourselves. And I would have thought that that itself must be in the bank's own long-term interest to ensure that the Irish economy gets through the more difficult times that it is now in, and that the banks need to look at the wider picture rather than just their own quarterly returns. So I'd like to ask you, Taoiseach, first of all, have you had any discussions with the major banking organisations in this country with a view to getting the banks to look at the bigger economic picture and to behave in a more measured and responsible and sensitive way at this time? You yourself have been good to the banks. I recall that in the 2005 budget, for example, you abolished the bank levy, which I think at the time was worth about €103 million per year of a benefit to the banks. The banks have done very well when the Irish economy was doing well. They made huge profits. The larger banks, the four larger banking groups, made most of their profits here in the Irish economy. So can I ask you, would you now exercise some leadership in relation to the banks, call in the major banking organisations, have a discussion with them, persuade them to act in a more measured, more reasonable, more sensitive way with Irish business at this very difficult time, so that the banks become, and their lending policies and their credit policies can be got to become part of the solution to our economic difficulties rather than adding to the problem, as quite frankly I think they are doing at the moment. Corla, I don't accept that the banks can hide behind, the banks operating in this country can hide behind the international credit squeeze any more than you can hide behind the international global economic environment with respect to the domestic policies that are applied here. I mean, we do know that there is an international backdrop to what both the banks do and what you do in relation to the economy. But the banks, as I've said, and particularly the four major banking groups, made most of their profits here in this country in good times. And I believe that they have a responsibility now to help to get the economy through the more difficult times that it is in. They're clearly not going to do that voluntarily. And looking at what they're doing and how they're dealing with individual businesses and with their individual customers, it does not appear as though they're willing to do that. And that is why I'm putting the suggestion to you, Taoiseach, and you didn't respond to it, and I'm putting it again to you. Will you ask the banks in to have a discussion with you as head of government so that you can talk with the banks and encourage them to take the wider view of the Irish economy and to take the longer-term view of the Irish economy, and to encourage them to assist in whatever strategy you have, which you haven't told us yet about, whatever strategy you have to move the economy forward from where it is at the moment and to move it into better times. So my specific question to you, Taoiseach, is will you ask the banks in for a discussion with you to have this wider discussion about where the economy is going, about their lending practices, and to encourage them not to be squeezing the life out of businesses at this moment? I mean, at the moment, what is happening is that the banks in their engagement with individual businesses are really throttling them. And their banks in their engagement, particularly with new businesses, are telling them to clear off, that they're not making money available to them. And unless people who want to start new businesses can get access to start-up capital, they're not going to start up businesses, and therefore we're not going to be able to contribute to moving the economy forward. And unless existing businesses get some kind of relief and understanding from the banking organisations, they're going to find themselves in continuing trouble.